So hello everyone, this would be our lecture video for chapter 2, which talks about variables, expressions, and statements. Okay, so this will serve as somewhat like a follow-up video sa katong gisend nako previously. So this would be focused more on you as your first time first time user or first time learner of Python. Okay? So, or first time in programming in general. Okay, sa katong previous video man it was actually a transition. Okay, it serves as a quick video for transitioning from one programming language to the Python programming language. Okay, so again, we'll be talking about variables, expressions, and statements. So kaning tulo, okay, these are, we could say, the building blocks of what makes a program in Python. Okay, and even in programming in general, okay, this could be considered as the building blocks of what makes a program. So of course, since we're learning Python, we need to learn about its syntax and usage specifically. Okay, so first is constants. Okay, now constants, it actually refers to fixed values such as numbers, letters, and strings. Okay, they are called constant since their values does not change. Okay, so for example, if you are going to write something like katong sa previous ninyo nga quiz, okay, you were required to print, I think you were required to print your name and your course. So kato inyong gibutang didto, written in between quotation marks, okay, or quotes, we could refer to them as constants, specifically string constants. Okay, so aside from string constants, napod tay numeric. So it's very important that we get to distinguish numeric and string. Later on, we'll get to discuss data types. Okay, so numeric constants are, as you expect, these are constants whose values does not change, and specifically these values are numeric. Okay, so again, numeric are quite unique since you are able to perform mathematical computation with this type of data. Okay, so string constants, again, as what I've mentioned earlier, it uses quotes. You could either use single or double quote. So later on, as we progress with our course, we get to see the proper usage. Okay, but for now, single quotes and double quotes could be used for strings in general. Okay, as you can see here, natay mga commands dere. Okay, so the examples here are actually written in, I think this is written in the interactive console. Okay, but anyway, if you're going to write the statement print, then in between our parentheses 1, 2, 3, since this is a function, okay, or this is a command in Python that enables you to output, okay, output something in the console. Okay, so this will actually display the number 1, 2, 3, and this 1, 2, 3 here is considered as a numeric constant. Okay, another print 98.6, this will output 98.6. Okay, so again, this is another type of numeric constant. Now here, the words hello world, okay, once you're going to write that in the statement, okay, kaning print kani siya, so it will output the word hello world. So these are all constants. Okay, so constants are actually very important. Okay, all of our following discussions would have some form of importance, okay, in programming. So next is another building block that we get to encounter or learn, okay, in programming is the concept of reserved words. Okay, now reserved words, these are actually words in Python that you could only use specifically, okay, in what Python requires you to use them. Okay, so later on we'll get to discuss variable naming. Okay, so in that degree, you could name a variable any way you want, except, okay, except with reserved words. So these are all the reserved words of Python. Compared to other programming languages, mas gamay-gamay ang reserved words sa Python. Okay, which makes it actually easier to remember. Okay, remember the specific constructs of how to make a Python program. Okay, so kani sila tanan, and mind you, these are all case sensitive. Okay, so later on we'll get to discuss how case is being treated, okay, or how case sensitivity is being treated in Python. Okay, so these are all reserved words, so you cannot use reserved words. Okay, later on we'll get to discuss variables, okay, variable names or identifiers. So di na to na pwede basta-basta magamit lang ning reserved words nga dili buot gusto ipahimo sa Python. Okay, for example, if you want to set a condition, okay, a condition in Python is how you want Python to behave if a certain condition is true or false. Now you would most likely use if there. Okay, so kana dili ni mo na basta magamit ang if as your variable. Okay, you could only use the word if when you are using conditionals. Okay, so variables. A variable is a name placed in the memory. Okay, you could treat variables as like containers of data. Okay, so it is a name placed in the memory where a programmer can store data and later retrieve the data using the variable name. Okay, so man itong buot pasabot kanina nga naay mga name ang variable in which we'll get to see later that you could actually choose whatever name you want, again as long as you don't use the reserved word that I've mentioned earlier. Okay, now the importance of having these variables or having this concept of memory access is when a certain program is running, okay, if you are dealing with data that requires user input or requires computation that requires data, okay, that is, let's say, you want to perform a multiplication of two values, okay, most likely you want that as a form of user input. Okay, so katong user input, you need to prepare that in your program so that whenever there's data that could be readily fed in that user input, okay, ma-process na sa ato ang program, and you could not do that without allocating that in the memory beforehand. Okay, so programmers get to choose the names of the variables. Okay, you can change the content of a variable in a later statement. So remember, again, I think I have discussed this in a previous lecture video. The equal sign is not used in a form of equality, so it doesn't mean that x will always be equal to 12.2, but instead how you're going to read this is 12.2, okay, this value is being assigned to the value x using this equal sign. So this equal sign is used as an assignment, okay, an assignment operator. So kung unsa naa dere sa ato ang right side sa ato ang equal sign, okay, whatever the resulting value, be it a constant or an expression, it will ultimately be stored in our variable x. So imagine x here, these are, let's say, we could say these are memory allocations. Okay, so in this point, okay, in this let's say when the code is being executed in a program, okay, x here will have a container that will hold whatever value that it currently has. Okay, so for now it is 12.2, and let's say naabot po ta diri sa y, so y is equal to 14. Okay, so x and y here, these are the variables that are containers of data, and for now we are dealing with variables that holds single value. Later, as we progress with our course, we get to see that a variable could actually store multiple data at the same time. So karon, one at a time. So at this point, mao ni iyang value. Now, it's very possible that as part of the program flow, okay, the value of a certain variable will be changed. Okay, changing this will could easily be done by assigning. Okay, you're assigning a new value. So now you are essentially overwriting the value of x, okay, to a new value of 100. So karon, pag execute ani sa code, okay, we now have the value 100 being assigned to a variable by the assignment operator here. Okay, so as you can see here, the updated value is no longer 12.2 but 100. Okay, it's very important that you get to learn this, okay, early para di mo maglibog. Okay, especially if you are trying to compute complex ng mga expression. Okay, this is also the reason why it's called a variable, since the data could, or the the data stored in that container, okay, kaning variable varies. Okay, so variable. Okay, so Python variable name rules. Okay, remember that I have told you that you could name your variable any way you want except from the reserved words. Now that's not entirely true kay napagyoy mo rag a certain specification. Okay, so a variable name could start with a letter or an underscore, but normally you do not use underscore as a starting character kay naay uban nga mga specifics in Python that sometimes would result to siguro unwanted or not unwanted, but mura bitaw there are certain aspects of Python in which Python will require you to use underscore, but for this course, okay, it is suggested that you do not use underscore as a first character for your variable names. So we could say that it should start with a letter. Okay, now in addition to that, it must consist of letters, numbers, and underscores. So you might be confused, sir, nga na ingon ka nga dili pwede ang underscore o number nga letter ra jud. The statement here refers to the start of the character of that variable name. Okay? Kana. So after the letter, pwede na dayon nga number, pwede dayon nga underscores. Okay? Since kani mga number underscores, this could actually aid you in describing your variable in a much better fashion or in a much better way. Okay? So kana. So you get to see here, and also it is case sensitive, meaning lahi ang capital letter, lahi ang small letter. So these are examples of a somewhat good, okay, or valid nga variable name. Spam, okay, murag mga pagkaon may example dre, natay spam, eggs, spam 23, pwede na siya. Okay? Though underscore spam is technically valid, but we should avoid using variable names starting with an underscore. Pwede na day na after sa first nga mga character. Okay? So, this is bad. Nga naman kay, again, a variable name should start with a letter or underscore. Okay? So, this is a number, so dili na pwede. The number sign here, this is not a valid, okay? This is not a valid variable name, since this will actually result to a comment. We'll get to discuss later what comments are, but since this is, of course, this is not a letter, so we could not use that. Okay? Now, even though here this is considered bad, even though here we use letter as our first character, then we have a number 12, but the dot here, okay, is not a valid character in naming your variables. Okay? Saka na. Dili pwede. Now, here, these are considered valid, but these are treated differently in Python since these have different cases. Okay? So, the word spam or the variable name spam differs from the word spam, okay, nga capital letter ang S or capital tanan. So, kani silang tulo lahi-lahi na sila treatment, or we could say that this refers to different things in Python. Now, it's not a good practice nga ang inyong main differentiation lang sa mga variable names ninyo isang case. Okay? So let's say naamoy usa ka variable na, let's say, x value. Okay? You name that as x, small letter x, underscore, small letter word tanan nga value, so VALUY. Okay? Then you intend to create another name, let's say capital letter X underscore small letter tanan nga word nga value. Though these two, okay, so though these two are treated, ako na lang i-type pa para di mo maglibog. So kani. Okay? So, this variable name, bali you have a variable name ngayong ani, okay? That is different from this. Okay? These are treated differently. But even though this is treated differently, it's not a good practice nga inyong main differentiation sa inyong variable sa inyong program is only the case. Okay? Since it would result, okay, dako ang tendency that it would result to confusion, especially if that variable is being used frequently. So kana likayin na lang na. So if you want to use another value, okay, you could use y value nga na. So this is a valid variable name. Okay, so kana. Now remember, di ba, you could use any name you want, again as long as it doesn't conflict with the reserved words, and as long as katong mga special character, di ba, unsay placement ato sa number and so on. Okay, now since we programmers are given a choice in how we choose our variable names, there is a bit of best practice. Okay, now best practices are not necessarily mura bitaw by the book nga rules, okay, but these are like agreed upon practices in which the community, let's say a community of programmers, okay, has collectively agreed upon nga mao gamiton. Okay, so we name variables to help us remember what we intend to store in them. Okay, this serves as a mnemonic or a memory aid. Okay, so that when you are in programming, once you get to see that variable, and most of the time your variables would mean something. Okay, so let's say a variable will hold your grades. You could have a variable named grades there. So it makes sense nga inyo nagipangananoy nga na, since it would be easier for you to track, okay, which variables contains the grades or the computation for, let's say, the average, the number of units nga na. Okay, now this can confuse beginning students because well-named variables often sound so good that they must be keywords. Okay, buot pasabot ani is sometimes, okay, naagyoy gusto na to himuon nga variable, but it so happens nga, let's say, makalimutan sa mga reserved word nga magamit nato. Okay, so let's say somehow you used a variable named let's say naghimo mo og pass. Okay, so you want to have a variable which best explains a certain student which passed a certain the subject. Okay, you might be tempted to use the word pass. Okay, now that would cause an error since of course that is a reserved word. Okay, that is why it's very important that when you are learning programming, or when you learn programming, okay, practice good. Okay, since as you go along with typing, creating code, realizing the errors that occurs, then knowing how to solve them, okay, unti-unti, okay, ma-improve ninyo ang inyong mnemonic or variable naming. Okay, at least kana ma-improve ninyo so that you will no longer be conflicted with what you're going to write. But sometimes, okay, writing or naming a variable, even though dili siya meaningful, okay, could also be viable. Meaning, it is not really always a requirement that your name should have a meaning. Nga, let's say, at a variable word is student. Okay? Atong variable name is, let's say, subject. Okay? Depende sa problem nga inyong ginosolve, pwede ra pod nga your variable could be in a form as symbolic lang gyud nga containers. Diba? This is very common in math. Okay? In algebra. Okay? In which ang ginagamit lang, diba? Na concept of variables. Okay? Sa ato ang algebra, atong find the value of x, find the value of y. You could actually use that as valid variable names. Okay? So how you're going to decide on that, okay, will ultimately, okay, depend on your experience. Okay? Your experience, okay? Of course, practice, okay? Correct practice. Then kana gyud, okay? Always apply your knowledge. Dili kay inyo lang ning tan-awon, memorizon, okay? Then dili ninyo sulayan og apply, dili ninyo sulayan og improve. So kana when you are a programmer, remember programming is an applied field, meaning dili tanan memorizon. Okay? Murag math, di ba? It requires you to perform application of your knowledge in a form of transformation of data. Okay? So let's common man na ang science. Science is closely related to math, and of course this is also your program serves as solutions to problems. Then kaning mga problems oftentimes or most likely requires scientific or mathematical nga mga solutions in which it's your job as a programmer to convert them. Okay? So kana. So that is a take on how you could name your variable. Okay? Again, it depends on the problem that you're dealing with. Okay? If you're dealing with problems that would help you better create a program in which you want to name them meaningfully, then so be it. Okay? But it's not always the case. Okay? Sometimes na ay mga instances in which based sa problem, let's say you are trying to convert a formula. So kanang mga x, y, and z, wala man ay inherent meaning. Ang ilaha lang sigurong meaning ana is lahi sila nga value, lahi sila nga variable nga gina-represent. So na meaning but not in a way nga murag basahon nato nga English as an English or as a real world object say nga na. So let us wade upon that. Okay? So kani, these are all valid variable names. Each of these variable names will contain different values. Okay? Now, this would be a very difficult program to read. Okay? So what is this bit of code doing? Even though this is valid, so we might be wondering, okay? Bisag kita naghimo ana nga program, if you give let's say a few days or even a few weeks, okay? A few weeks or a month without touching that code, without thinking about that program, pagbalik ninyo ani nga mao ninyong gihimo, maglibog yun mo. Okay? So, we get to see that this variable contains 35.0. Then, this variable contains 12.5. Then, if we look closely, this variable, okay, this is actually the same with this. And how this is being made? Is it the same? No, it's not. Okay? Mao ni problema ani nga pagngalan. Okay? You get to see here that it's not, these two are not entirely the same. So, this is a different variable. So, how this is being computed, the value of this is kani. Kani siya nga variable, and kana. If you get to check, pare, mao ba ni? Okay, mao ni. Kaning first nga variable diri is mao ning na siya 35 nga value. 35.0. Diri, mao ni kaduha. So, this is very difficult. Okay? This is very difficult to remember. Okay? So, if we have another try. Kani. So, what are these bits of code doing? So, kani, though this doesn't give you any meaning, this could be a viable way of naming this. Mas dali na ito mahibawan nga, okay, this A is a valid variable name which has a value of 35.0, B is equal to 12.50, okay, then C is equal to A times B. So, mas dali na nato ni ma-decipher, kibali, okay, mas dali nato ma-digest. And ultimately, we are going to print the value of C in our program. Okay? Now, depende sa inyong program, let's say, if you are treating this, let's say, as a part of a program which computes the pay of a certain employee, then you could name your variables in this manner. Okay? So, we could say this is much more appropriate na dayon. Okay? So, we get to say nga, ay, ang hours di ay nato is maoning 35.0, mo day but pasabot ani. Okay? Then, ang atong rate is 12.50. Okay? Most likely this is in US dollars. Okay? So, ang basic pay is hours times rate, which is a very common computation, a very basic, albeit, a computation. Then, of course, we want to know the result of computation, then we get to print that. Okay? So, kaning duha, kani or kani, this could be viable depende kung unsay nature sa inyong program. Okay? This is not advised. Okay? Ikaw mismo nga naghimo ani, not only that it's very time consuming, okay, it's also very confusing. Okay, so again, how you name your variable depends on the problem that you are solving. Next is the concept of sentences or lines. Okay, So similar to English or English language, in order for you to be for your program or for your, let's say, conversation or language to be meaningful, okay, you need to construct a sentence that follows the way of the English language or the English grammar. Okay? So kani sa atong Python, naapod tay grammar nga gina-follow. Okay? Grammar or syntax nga gina-follow. Okay? How we write things in Python. So we have been seeing this. X is equal to 2. This is an assignment statement. Okay? A statement in any programming languages or in Python is essentially the same as what a sentence is in a paragraph. Okay? So kana, this is a valid sentence. This is every sentence in Python tells an instruction. It's like it's an equivalent of an instruction, okay, or a step in your program. So here you assign the numeric value of 2 to the variable x. So I hope by now you're not confused with this. Kani, this is also an assignment statement. Okay, but it assigns an expression instead. Okay, that's why it's called assignment with expression. Okay, expression in Python, okay, or in programming, these are computational nga mga statements. We could say statements that perform certain degree of transformation or computation, in which you ultimately arrive with a value. That is why it could be assigned. Okay, you could only assign a value in a variable. How you get that value, okay, could be in a form of a constant, so ingani, or an expression. So kanina gyud ni siya ultimate nga value nga ma-store. So we'll try this later. This is a print statement. Okay? Since you are essentially printing whatever the value of x here. Okay? So ang color coding ani, you might have noticed na i-coding niya. So kaning variable color coded orange, so maning x, operator is white, constant is kani 2, then function is kani. Later on we'll get to see more functions in our program. Okay? So unsay buot pa, this is actually this set of sentences. Okay, these are actually a valid block of code in Python. Okay? So if we're going to treat it as such, okay, in this line, okay, x is equal to 2. Okay, so initial value sa x is 2. But if you're going to write this again in Python, okay, ang inyohang technique ani unsaon ninyo para dili mo maglibog is tan-awon gyud ninyo una ang right side. Okay? Ayha ninyo i-assign. Okay, if inyohan nang diretsog basa nga x is equal, maribog yun mo. So ang technique ani is okay, tan-aw na to una sa right side. Sa right side nakita nato na ay expression nga x plus 2. Okay? What is the current value of x? Okay? The current value of x is 2. Okay? So we get to see that this is actually 2 plus 2. So kung unsay result ana, okay, i-assign dayon siya sa value of x. So ulahi ang assignment ng statement. Una is ang pag-evaluate sa expression, okay, to arrive with a value. So once you get to arrive with a value, ay dayon i-assign. So I hope you get it. So if you get to print that, that will actually result to a value 4. And to prove that, okay, let's try it out in a program. Now, if you're going to open, let's say, I think I was requiring you onlinepython.com. Okay, leave. If you're going to write that in your browser, of course, you could also do this sa PyCharm or sa Visual Studio Code. But for the sake of those who do not have access to those tools, so online, is that online Python? Online Python, so Python online. Online Python. Okay, online sabong mo online Python. So, akane online-python. you get to see these words, okay, these, or no, not these words, these statements which is written by default. You erase that, okay, mura na siya og template kibale, okay. So you erase that before starting with coding, okay. Erase niyo. You should arrive with this view here. So unsa to ato ang kuan, unsa to ato ang this sentences or line yung topic, okay kani, okay. So x is equal to 2, okay, then napo tay x is equal to x plus 2, then print x, okay. So if we're going to make this run, okay, you'll get to see that the result is 4, which is as we expected, okay. Again nga naman, in this point of the program, okay, normally a program will compile left, yung pagbasa is top to bottom ang pagbasa sa lines. That is usually the case if you're not dealing with loops and conditional. So in this case, nga na. So in this point of program execution, there is part in your memory na gi-assign ang Python nga gipanganlan niya og x. Okay, gipanganlan niya x, and ang content ana sa memory is 2. Okay, so okay. Pag abot dere, the program will update the value of x, okay, seeing that there is another statement here which changes its assignment. So before we get to assign what value that is, we need to perform the expression first sa atong right side, okay. So x here at this point of your program is actually holds the value 2, okay. So if you replace that here, or if you are going to compute that in this statement here, so what will happen is it would become 2, okay. May mo siya 2 plus 2. So 2 plus 2 of course is equal to 4. So 4 here would then be ultimately assigned to the variable x. So the new value of x here is now 4. And when we are going to print that in our console output, okay, we get to see the value 4 since mao naman na ang latest value of x, okay, nga nakuha niya prior to printing or executing that print statement, okay. So kana. Next, sentences or lines, assignment statement. So kani, okay. This is what I have told you earlier. We assign a value to a variable using the assignment statement. An assignment statement consists of an expression on the right side and a variable to store the result. Okay? So, kani. Let's try and solve this or use this as an example. Okay? So, sa kani, okay, a variable is a memory location used to store the value. So in this case, it doesn't show here, but ang initial value na direct, let's say the initial value of x is 0.6, okay. So it's very similar sa to ang previous nga discussion. So we have here equal sign 3.9 times x times, okay, we'll get to discuss operators later, okay. Multiplication uses asterisk as its operator. So kana 1 minus x, okay. So what will happen is iyahaning i-replace, okay, kibale we'll get to create an actual program that refers to this scenario. So i-replace 0.6 ang x diri 0.6, so duha ka book x nga gigamit na 0.6 na value, okay. So once that is being done, okay, remember MDAS, we'll discuss that later, but here what will happen is unsa may pinakauna ani, okay, sa atong MDAS una ang parenthesis nga operation. So una ni 1 minus 0.6 is 0.4. Sunod dayon nga himuon is, since these are all on the same order, multiplication man tanan, so iyan na din ang larason. So 3.9 times 0.6 times 0.4, we're going to open our calculator for that. So 3.9 times 0.6 times 0.4, so we have 0.936 as a value of x. So here we get to see that the right side is an expression. Once the expression is evaluated, the result is placed and assigned to x. Okay, so as what I've mentioned earlier. So a variable is a memory location used to store a value. So the value stored in a variable can be updated by replacing the old value with a new value x. So once this expression has been evaluated, di ba? 0.936. Pag evaluate pag assign sa value of x, of course, the new value of x, okay, would now be 0.936. Okay? So before we progress with expressions, let's try that. Okay? So ingana ito siya 0.6. Okay? X is equal to 3.9 times x. Okay, ato sa ni paggamay. So 3.9 times x times 1 minus x kana. I think that's it. Kaya ito na lang ikuan ba para maawat yun. Let's keep it like this. Okay? So yung but of course how to determine the value of x is could have something like this. Okay? Oops. So let's say I'm going to print x here. Okay? To check if if ga-retain or unsay mga existing or current values sa x during part of program execution. So if we're going to make this run, okay, ang una ninyo nakita dere kaning 0.6, that is actually the first print statement here, okay, which is actually the current value of x prior sa pag-execute ani nga print statement. Okay? So, since ang value sa x ani nga point is 0.6 man, of course, ang first nga print statement diha is 0.6. Now, since we perform this calculation, di ba? Let's say we replace the value of x. Okay, here, or not replace, but we assign or we get to know that the value of x here is 0.6. Okay, bale mahimo na siyang ingani. If we are retrieving the actual value of the variable being used. Okay? So, again, once that is being computed, it would be assigned here. So, kung the value 0.9356 or 936 would then be the current value of x here. So, if you're going to write the print statement print x here, that's why naano siyang value. Okay? So, I hope you understand the concept of variables here and assignment. So, let's proceed with expressions. Numeric expressions, okay, these are the most common, okay, expressions that we get to deal with in programming. So, because of the lack of mathematical symbols on computer keyboards, we use computer speak to express classic math expressions. But pasabot ani, there are certain characters that you should use if you want to perform that numeric expression. For let's say you use asterisk in multiplication, and exponentiation, okay, you use double asterisk. Okay? So mao ni ato ang mga operators. So addition and subtraction, okay? Parehas ra sa traditional nga math way of writing. So ato ang multiplication is asterisk. It doesn't use the normal katong percent, okay, since that is treated differently. What I meant is letter X, okay? Letter X or dot, okay? Mo man ang common na to ginagamit sa multiplication, di ba? So it's not dot, okay? You need to use asterisk for that. Division also, okay? Forward slash. So as I mentioned earlier, power is double asterisk, then katong ingon kanina nga lahi ang treatment sa percent in if you want to use that as a division, though it's still part of, it somewhat uses division in a process, but the output is different. Okay, ang kani siya, the percent sign is used as an operator to get the remainder portion of that division. So ato na ipakita niya. Okay, so actually getting a remainder of a certain division is very common. It's a very common solution to various problems, okay, in programs. Kani, so we have, okay, na-encounter na to ni kanina. Okay, xx is equal to 2, xs is equal to xx plus 2. So kana, this is addition, this is multiplication, as you get to see here. Yy is equal to 440 times 12, print yy, so we have this. So dili na siguro nato ni i-demonstrate kaning mga simple ra kaayo sa separate nga console. So zz is equal to yy divided by 1000. If we're going to print that out, so you have this result here. So kani 20, jj is equal to 23. Okay, so kk is equal to jj percentage percent sign 5. Now you might be wondering unsa ni ang 3. Okay, that 3 is the remainder portion of that division. Okay, so nahitabo ani is unsay value sa jj 23, di ba? So magigamit siya diri nga expression. So 23 divided by 5, pila man na? Okay, so certainly na decimal part ana, okay, or na fractional part, kay 23 is not divisible by 5. So kung sa kinder pa mo, okay, or sa elementary pa mo, there was the concept of decimal was wala pa kay ginagamit, but the concept of remainder is ginagamit. So mao ni ang buot pasabot ani. Pila ang sobra if you are going to divide 23 to 5. Okay? So if you get to think of it, the nearest number that is divisible by 5 sa 23 is 20. Okay? So 20 divided by 5 is, di ba? It results to a whole number. Now 23 minus 20, okay, kay di ba? Katuma ang bungkig ato is actually ang tulo, ang number ang 3. Okay? So we get to say that the remainder portion of 23 divided by 5 is 3. So that is actually shown here. Okay? So 23 divided by 5, okay? 4, okay? Ang pinakagamay nga number nga pinakaduol niya nga mag-result sa positive is ang 20. So 4 times 5 is 20. Okay? So very common, very basic division. 23 minus 20 is equal to 3. We could no longer divide that. So we get to declare that remainder is 3. That is why 3 dire. So we'll get to see this. We'll get to see examples later. So kanipod, this is just exponentiation. This is like 4 to the power of 3. Okay? So 4 times 4 times 4, that is 64. So before we proceed to order of evaluation, let's discuss more of this remainder in detail. Kaya nagkakakalibog gani. So let's say, man to ato ang kani. So let's say we have x is equal to 55. Okay? Then y is equal to 10. So if we get to have, let's say, the value of z is equal to 55 divided by 10. Now doing this would perform normal division, in which this would result to a quotient. Okay, a result on is quotient. Doing this, 55% sign 10, this will result to the remainder of that division. Okay, so let's name this as ZQ and ZR. Okay, para magkuan lang, para we get to print this in the differently or individually. Okay, so if ito ang print og ZQ, print ZR. Okay, so if we're going to run this, okay, okay, slightly confusing, but let's just change. Okay, we should not be doing this, by the way. Okay, since nag-effort naman lang ko og gamit og variable dere, okay, this should be x and y. Okay, so what I've done is a mistake. It's very redundant and it doesn't make sense. This makes more sense if you intend to use this as part of your computation. Okay, doing this, okay, you would easily, diba, you could easily change the value of x, that it affects the rest of the program that utilizes that x as a variable. So let's say mo na ko ni og 60. Let's say 68. Kana. Okay? So here mahulog nga 68 divided by 10. So ang resulta ani would be the quotient. Okay? Whatever the result of the division. Here, since you're using the modulo operator, this is also called percent sign, is also called modulo. Modulo operator or the modulus. Modulo. Okay? So kana. So if you're going to make this run, okay, kani 6.8 here, okay, that was based on the actual division operation, and since this 68 is definitely not a divisible by 10, we expect nga na fractional part or na decimal part. Okay, so 68 divided by 10, that is actually 6.8, which is mao niyang gihimo dire. Here you are attempting, though essentially we could say that it's still dividing, but ang result nga atong gusto nga ma-store instead of the quotient is the remainder. And if you want that to happen, you use the percentage sign or the modulo operator or the modulus. Okay, manitawag ana niya sa programming. So unsa may remainder ani? Okay, so mahulog nga it's like 60 divided by 10. Okay, 60 man ang pinaka duol niya, di ba? Nga number nga pwede divide sa 10. So 68 minus 60, okay? 8 is the bit. It's the value that is kubali murag nabungkig or nabilin. That is why the remainder is 8. Di ba murag kabalo naman gyud siguro mo. 68 divided by 10, okay? Ang remainder ana, if you do not express that in a decimal format, would be, the answer for that would be 6. Okay, ang resulta ana is, in this example, is 68, diba? 68 divided by 10, that would result to that should be 10. Okay, that would actually be 6 remainder, okay, 8. So ang kaning modulo operator, instead of storing the result of the division, it only stores the remainder value, which is 8. That is why atong makita dira, di ba? We are using the modulo operator here. Makita nato nga result diha is 8. Kaning 8 mao ni siya dire. Okay? So actually, this is a very useful, a very helpful operator when solving certain programming problems. Okay, or let's say you want to determine if a number is odd or even. Common kay gamiton ang modulo ana. Okay, next order, I think it's order of evaluation. Okay, so when we string operators together, meaning ato ang isumpay-sumpay, Python must know which one to do first. Okay, so this is called the operator precedence. Okay, which operator takes precedence over the others. Okay, so let's say kani x is equals to 1 plus 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by 5 to the power of 6. Now you should not do it in this manner, nga inyuha nang manuman i-type gyud nga ang answer ana is, okay, so ayun ra, 1 plus 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by 5, okay, to the power of, okay, no, it's not square. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is dili ninyo ni basahon left to right immediately. Okay, since natay gina-follow nga order of evaluation, and sa katong elementary pa mo, high school pa mo, college pa mo, natay ginatawag nga MDAS. Okay, so PEMDAS ganito. Okay, so natay parenthesis first, parenthesis is being evaluated first, then multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Okay nga na. So knowing that, actually napatay ko when it comes to exponentiation, that is PEMDAS, di ba? Parenthesis, exponentiation, okay, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So ang answer or how you going to solve this in your mind, importante gyud nga dili mo magsalig. Di mo magsalig nga i-google ra ninyo or i-calculator ra ninyo ang inyong pag-solve kay there are certain scenarios in which it's very important nga kamo mismo kasabot sa inyong gina-program. Dili kay gi-accept ra ninyo na nga solution without knowing nga mao gyud na ang iyang, let's say, formula. Okay? So how you're going to do this is, first you need to evaluate. Okay, wala man tay parenthesis. So wala tay parenthesis nga ma-prioritize dire or ma-evaluate. Okay? Next is nata exponentiation. So una nato himuhon ang 5 to the power of 6. Okay? After which, okay, sa may sunod. Ito ko na. Let's have a notepad for this. So x is equal to 1 plus 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by 5 to the power of 6. So una nato na i-evaluate is kani. Okay, let's just temporarily place parenthesis para makita nato kung unsay una. So doing that, sa may resulta na, that is 1 plus 2 times 3. So this is a very common approach in simplifying expressions in math, diba? Okay, kopyahon ninyo per step on the way, okay, as you simplify the expression. Inyo hatong kopyahon tong dili pa ma-evaluate, then inyo rang i-change is katong una nga na-evaluate. In this case, kaning to the power of 6. Okay? So, mao may pinaka-highest order. So, 5, pila man ang 5 to the power of 6. So, let's actually use Python for that. Okay? So, print 5 to the power of 6. So that is 15625. So divided by 12z. 1 plus 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by, ano nga tayo yung i-paste? 15625. 15625. 156, diba? 25. Na. Next, unsay sunod? Okay. Kana, before we proceed, okay, I hope nga kanang kuan, dili na ni kuan sa inyo ha, murag new, entirely new gyud. So dili na kay nako ni i-discuss gyud in detail. I expect you nga to nakabalo na mo, at least familiar mo. Okay? Nga naano nga ruling. Okay? Kay whenever you're going to solve a specific math problem, there is always one answer. Common na to na makita sa mga Facebook nga math challenges. Okay? Makita gid nato nga nay uban wala nakabaloan ng PEMDAS. Okay? Or though kabalo sila but dili sila kabaloon sa akong pag-apply. So I hope that is not the case to you, or if it is, then I hope we get to correct that now. Okay? So kani. unsay sunod i-evaluate ani. Okay? So, ang sunod ma-evaluate ani is kani o kani. Parehas na sila og level of order of evaluation. Okay? So that would be 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by 156 to 5. Okay? So nga na. So that would be 1 plus 2 times 3, that is 6, minus 4 divided by, again we'll use Python for that since that's quite a complex, dili mamata-matang expression. 156 to 5, tama ba? 156 to 5. So 0.000256. Okay? Now, since parehas na sila og order tanan, okay? So, x is equal to 1 plus 6, that is 7. 7 minus 7 minus 0.000256. Going to make that run. That is 6.999744. Okay? So let's try. Okay? Kani atong bana-bana ni, di ba? Let's try doing this or feeding this expression, okay, sa atuang Python nga statement. This is actually a valid Python statement. So let's check if unsay itsura ana. Diretso na nato na i-print. Ano? Let's assign it to a variable. 1 plus 2 times 3 minus 4 divided by 5 to the power of 6. Na. We're going to print x. We're going to make that run. As you get to see, pareha sila output. Okay? Meaning, sakto to ato ang pag evaluate. Okay? So, order of evaluation, okay, as what I mentioned earlier, parenthesis, power, multiplication, then addition, then left to right. Okay, daghaga kalibog aning left to right. Okay? So, we'll use another example nga mas makita nato nga naay instances nga maglahi-lahi ang answer. So, highest precedence rule to lowest precedence rule, parentheses are always respected. Exponentiation, next, multiplication, division, and remainder, parehas na sila tanag level. Okay? If namoy nakita nga multiplication, division in a certain equation nga walay parenthesis, okay? Then wala na lain nga much higher order than sa ilaha, imuha nang i-perform left to right. Similar to addition and subtraction. Okay? So, left to right na dayon if, let's say, parehas na gitanan og level. Okay? So, kani. So, x is equals to 1 times 1 plus 2 to the power of 3 minus 4 kani. How should this be evaluated? Okay? So, the expected value is 11.0. So, this should be evaluated in this manner. So, kani, since there is no parenthesis here, so, wala tayong ma-evaluate nga within parenthesis. So, next is power. So, 2 to the power of 3 is 8. Okay? So, we proceed to the next. Mura bitaw kung gihimo kanina nga we copy the equation to the next line except for those evaluated first. Okay? So, 1 plus 8 minus 4 times 5. Ano sunod? Next, sa kaninga statement, okay, ang sunod is, actually, madungan ni sila. Kani. Ang mahitabo ani is, i-perform ni, then, unsay result ana, i-perform ani diri. Okay? So, you might be wondering here, Sir, di ba M dapat una M kaysa sa D? No, multiplication and division are actually the same level. That is why, if you get to see here, 1 plus 8 divided by 4 times 5, you get to perform, kani sila, since una gini sila, okay? Nagiuna ani sa ilang duha. Ang una ani is actually ang division. Okay? Since parehas ra nig level or order of evaluation ang division o multiplication, you get to perform this. That is why natay 1 plus 2 dere. Then you get to perform this next. Okay? Nay uban, ilang himuon is unahon nila ning 4 times 5. Kay mao lagi m das, una ang m kaysa sa d. That is not the case. You would actually yield a different answer. Okay? So 1 plus 2 times 5, 10. So 1 plus 10, left to right na dayon, 11. Okay? So if you treat that differently, tayo ko na, if you're going to treat that in the same manner nga ako ang giingon kanina, nga giuna ninyo ang multiplication kay m das lagi una, ang m. Okay? So let's say x is equal to 1 plus 2 to the power of 3 divided by 4 times 5. Okay? So una is kani, di ba? Unahan na ta na. It's a good technique nga i-parenthesis ninyo. Okay? Mura i-parenthesis ninyo ang gusto ninyo evaluate og first. Okay? Para di mo malibog. So nga na. Even though it's not the actual equation here, but when you are going to simplify this equation, this could be a technique you could use. Okay? So i-kopya ninyo. Then kung unsa to ang inyohang gi-evaluate first, mao to inyohang i-compute. So 2 to the power of 3 is 8 divided by 4 times 5. So kato, some of you might be tempted to perform this. So inyong himuon siguro ay m das una ang multiplication. Okay? I-perform na to na. So let's say 1 plus 8 divided by what is 4 times 5? That is 20. Okay? Then x is equals to 1 plus perform na to ni 8 divided by 20. So 8 divided by 20, so 8 divided by 20 is 0.4. Then ingon mo okay, ang value is 1 plus 0.4 is 1.4, which is not the same with this. Okay? And in mathematics, an expression will only yield, okay, most of the time that expression would only yield one answer. Definitely 11.0 is not equal to 1.4. Nahitabo ani is sayop inyong pag-evaluate. Okay? So the correct way of evaluating is ingani, in which you do not evaluate 4.5 first, but since kani sila ang una, okay, pareha sila level, multiplication and division has the same level or order of evaluation, okay, ingani ni siya. Okay? If inyong papaspason, it's not papaspason, you need to perform 8 divided by 4 first. Okay? Since parehas naman sila level, and if parehas sila level, then sila ang pinaka-highest level nga equation, then you get to perform left to right. Okay? So, 8 divided by 4, 2 times 5, ingana, 1 plus 2 times 5 dayon. Okay? So, essentially unsay giuna ninyo ni og perform, then unsay result ana inyo hadang gi-multiply ana. Mura pog left to right na siya. Okay? Nga treatment. So 2 times 5 is 10, then you have 11. Okay? So I hope that is clear to you. Another example. Okay? Have we tried this? Have we tried this in wala, di ba? So let's try this. Okay? Let's try this in Python para makita gyud nato nga mao gyud ang pagbasa sa Python. So that is 1 plus 2 to the power of 3 4 times 5. Okay, let's have it equal spaces. Kana. Diba? If we're going to print that, okay, 11.0. Okay, mao gyud ang iyahang. The Python, Python and the result from Python and kanito ang approach is the same, which is sakto ni. Okay? So kana. So let's have another problem. Let's say kani. How about this problem? Okay, x is equal to kana. How do we evaluate this? Okay? So first is unsa may una? PEMDAS. So we get to see nga uy na ay parenthesis. Now this is actually not okay. If you get to see this, let's say in a problem, okay, this could not readily be used as a valid statement in Python. Okay, nga naman. This is written in a traditional mathematical manner, okay, in which multiplication is oftentimes not shown when it is paired next to parenthesis. So I hope wala pa na nawala sa inyo ha. Okay? If you're going to convert this in an equivalent Python nga statement, okay, or mathematical nga mathematical nga expression or numeric nga expression, is dapat na pa na siya asterisk diha. Okay? So if makikita mo problem nga ginapahimo is you solve this, okay, in a Python program, you create a program that that solves this equation, okay, ayaw mo dasmag diretso, okay, since this ang buot pasabot ana is napatay parenthesis. Okay? So with that, we get to continue. So unsa may unang ma-evaluate ani? Kaning 2 plus 3. Okay, this is in between a parenthesis. Okay, so remember PEMDAS. So 30 plus 90 divided by 6 times sama na 2 plus 3 is 6. Ano? 5. Diba? 2 plus 3 is 5. Next. Okay? Ang sunod ana is parehas ra gihapon kanina. Since multiplication, division and multiplication is the highest order in this numeric expression, then they would be performed left to right. Okay? So kani. So x is equal to 30 plus 90 divided by 6, to be sure, 90 divided by 6 is 15 times 5. So next ana is 15 times 5. 30 is equal to 15 times 5. 15 times 5 is 75. Should that be plus 75. Tama ba? Okay, then ultimately 30 plus 75, so 30 plus 75 is 105. Okay, ang mistake nga mahimo ani sa uban similar sa ako ang gipakita kanina is ingani. Okay, x is equal to, let's say 30 plus 90 divided by 6 times 2 plus 3. Okay? So, ilahang himuon is, of course, unang kuha na. Marag di magit masayop mo aning parenthesis first. Oops. Times 5. Okay? Na tendency uban, okay? Unahon ni. Similar sa ako ang gi-emphasize kanina. So, ilang mahimo is 30 plus 90 divided by ila man na 6 na 5 is 30 dayon ila dayon ingani 30 plus 90 divided by 30, 90 divided by 30 is 3. Okay, so x is mahimog 33, which is, okay, what you have done is wrong. The same formula, the same no to equation. Okay, in this case, these are essentially the same equation. They should have the same answer. So in this case, mauning sakto. We expect this to be correct. This is wrong. Okay, sayop inyong pag-evaluate. Okay, so if you're going to update this using our example here, 90 divided by 6 times 2 plus 3. Tama ba? This is the common issue when you are trying to compile online, since it depends on the website itself. It depends on the your connection. If wala mo internet, then definitely dili mo ganag normal ay inyong program. So this could be confused. The problem with this is this could be commonly confused with kaning loop ang inyong program, but of course there's no loop here. Okay, wala ni siya gahang. But what really happened here is there's a technical issue in the side of onlinepython.com. So let's try and stop this. If may encounter ninyo na, what you can do is kopyahin ninyo yung code, then siguro i-refresh ninyo. Okay, erase that, paste, then run. Okay, so nga na. As you get to see 105 ang answer, which is the answer here, in which kung unsa atong approach mao na ang gihimo sa Python. Okay, so I hope this topic is clear to you. Kay common jud na siya nga confusion, though this is outside programming, but since most of the time we are dealing with computational or mathematical computation when we are creating programs, okay, this could affect your understanding or your, let's say, assumption of what is right or wrong in your programs. Okay, so next is type, or we could call this as data type. Okay, in Python, variables, literals, and constants have a type. Unsay klase sila nga data. So Python knows the difference between an integer number and a string. Okay, so diba earlier we discussed about how different data or different data has different types. Sama ni. Okay, it could be a number. Okay, it could be a string. Okay, though there are many forms of data or many type of data in programming, so for now we'll get to focus on these two. Now, a common confusion is, okay, different operator or different expression behaves differently. Okay, behaves differently even though we are using the same operator. What I mean by this is for example, the plus operator means addition if you are adding numbers, but in string it actually refers to concatenate, meaning to put together or sumpayon. So for example, you have a variable here named ddd, okay, which is equal to 1 plus 4. Okay, so that is a basic numeric computation or addition. Okay, so if you're going to print that, natay 5, but you could actually use addition, diba, when you're dealing with strings. How do you know that you're dealing with strings? Okay, as what I've mentioned earlier, strings are enclosed with quotations. Okay, in this case, single quotes. So EEE is is assigned to a value of this string hello, na space diha, quotation, enclosed with quotation, plus there. Ang mahitabo na, if you're going to print EEE, iyan ang gisumpay. Okay? Iyan gidikit into one whole string. Okay? So that is how string is different from numeric. Okay? And how you get to see that there are different types of data in Python. Okay? Now, Python knows what type everything is. Okay? Though some operations are prohibited, we'll get to see later. An example of that is you cannot add 1 to a string. Okay, so we can ask Python what type something is by using the type function. So example here, okay, this is valid. EE is equal to hello plus there. So mahitabo ani is na siya string nga hello there. But if we're going to write EE is equal to EE plus 1, this one here is treated as an integer. An integer, by the way, is a type of number which is of whole. Okay? Whole number na siya. Meaning wala siya decimal part. So the number 1 is considered as an integer. Okay? Now you could not add the integer 1 to a string type nga hello there. This would cause an error similar to this. Now if you want to know, okay, a helpful function, if you want to know what type of data that variable is, you get to use the function type. So let's say type EE will actually tell you that is a type of string. Okay, under the string class. So ang inyo na is kanilang. Okay, so type sa hello is also string, type sa 1 is int. Okay, now numbers have two main types. I've mentioned earlier integers. These are whole numbers in which wala sila fractional part or decimal part. So this could be negative or positive. Whereas ang floating point numbers, or ato aning common ma-identify as decimal numbers, is numbers or are numbers that have decimal parts. Okay? So, pwede sila negative, pwede sila positive, but naa sila fractional part in a form of decimal. Kana. So, sige to see here. X is equal to 1. Ang type na sa X is int. Okay? Temperature, let's say you have a variable which holds a value of 98.6. If you get to write type, temp, ang value ana is 1. Remember, kaning example there is atong lecture notes, it is using the interactive nga compiler in which line by line nga execution. If you want to try this out in online Python or in PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, you need to write print para makita ninyo. Okay? Sa console. Okay? So before we deal with type conversion, let's try these things out. Okay? Ano eh? Okay, di ba? Let's say we have a word DDD. Okay, para consistent sa ito ang discussion as to lecture note. 1 plus 4. Okay, so if we're going to print that, expect that we have the value 5. Okay, of course. So we have EEE is equal to, let's use single quote, hello space there. Importante nga na space kay it is treated as a character mampod. Okay? Print EEE. If you're going to do that, so natin makita nga 5 og hello there. Okay? You notice na space diha. If you're going to remove that, may tabuan na is yung sumpayon. Okay? Since again walay space diha, okay? Kung unsa gid iha isumpay. Okay? Since a space is still a character in your string, in a string value, okay? So if you expect to have a space there, you need to put a space in your string there. Pwede dire, pwede dira. Okay? Or you could even do something like this. Pwede na siya. Okay? Na. Sige to see, parehas ra. Now, here, the addition symbol is used for numeric computation. That is why nagpakita diri is 5 since yang i-compute 1 plus 4, which are both 1 and 4 here are both numeric data. Kani dire, okay? All of this kani these operands, okay, kaning the actual values that you are dealing with in any computation, it's called operands. Kaning mag-transform sa ila, it's called operator. Okay? All of the operands here are string. That's why iyahan ang himuon, iyang himuon is iyang i-concatenate or iyang ipangsumpay into one whole string. So kani, doing this will yield you or will result to a whole string which contains the words hello space there. Okay? Now, if you're going to do something like this, okay, EEE is equal to EEE plus 1. Okay? So what is the existing value of EEE here? It's actually the word hello there. But since you are performing this with an addition to a non-string or a numeric data, this will cause an error. If we're going to make this run, okay, na-execute ni, okay, this depends on your compiler, okay, sometimes dili niya execute tanan, but in this case, gi-execute niya ang mga saktong ang mga lines of code. So yan yung gi-execute, which is no problem, that is 5. Yan yung gi-execute. Okay, let's have it printed. Ana. Okay, let's make this run again. Okay, the same error. So yan yung gi-execute, so name mo siya hello there. But in this case, once you have done this in your code, okay, mag-error na din siya. Okay, so ito yung error. Traceback, okay, na si traceback error. Can only concatenate string, not int to string. So, yung but pasabot ani is you could only concatenate, which is the current value of triple E here is a string. You could only concatenate another string here. Okay, so there's a problem with that since 1 is not a string. Okay, so let's say we add, let's say x is equal to 1. Then, we add x here. Okay, so essentially the same rin sila og error. Ako lang gihimo is gi-assign lang nako ang variable or gihimo ano nako variable which stores the value of 1, then use that here. The reason that I'm doing this is ngani, okay? We want to check, okay? We want to check let's erase this to have no error in our program, okay? So we want to check, okay? Let's say we want to check unsa man gi-type ani ngano sayop mangko, okay? Why did it resulted to an error? Nga type error. Tawag is type error. Okay, natay type error. As you can see here, natay type error. Okay? If you want to check what type that data, that constant, that variable is, okay, you could simply write something like this. Okay? So let's say, ito lang yung panason po. So if you're going to print type, okay, type of DDD nga na, okay, so kaning nga na para di mo malibog. So atong gihimo is you want to determine what type DDD as a variable is, okay, and we want to do that also sa tuang kuan. Dali na lang, type EEE. Well, let's see if iya ipakita without the print statement. We're going to make this run. Okay, as you get to see here, wala niya gipakita ang type. There's no error, okay? It just so happens nga wala type print statement nga magpakita sa type. So if you want to print that out, in which that is the case, we enclose that, okay? We enclose that in a print statement. So mura kibali ni siya og ato ang gina-troubleshoot. Okay, it's a form type. Using the type function could be useful in troubleshooting kung nabay contradiction sa inyong mga type sa to ang operands, knowing that in this case dapat tanan parehas og type if you want to perform operations on them. Okay, so if you're going to make this run, so you get to see 5, it's a class of int. Okay, so integer siya, okay, whole number. Here, dere, hello there, kaning EEE, it's a type of string. Okay? Okay. So, dili kiday pwede. Kay laylay sila og type. Okay? So, kana. Now, what if ngani? Okay? If I'll ask you, x is equal to 10. X is equal to 10 but with quotes. Okay, not x, not y. What do you think would be the output if you're going to write type x and print type y? Tsaka yung output ana. Okay, will this result to an integer dire? And the pod, are they both integer? Later on, we'll discuss unsa ni. These are actually comments in code. So, comments, these are not included in program execution but as a form of documentation, okay, or remarks. But going back, kana. So, let's see ha. Let's try. Okay. So, you get to see, ang first diri nga statement is it is of int. Type int. Okay, or int iyahang type, which is, okay, correct. Okay, which is expected, I mean, since 10 is an integer. But adding quotations here will actually change the type of your data. Okay? So here, type y, even though ato ang basahon nga 10, this is actually treated as a string. That is why string ang iyahang value diha. So, what will happen is, dili mo basta makahimog ing ani. Okay? Z is equal to x plus y. This would, this would result to an error, a type error. Since you are trying to perform a computation between an integer and a string. So, malibog ang Python ana. Okay? If you are going to do that, so natay error, unsupported operand times for int and string. Okay? So, this is a very common nga murag mistake. Okay? Another is ingani. Let's say we change this correctly. Okay? Kana, if we're going to make this run, wala na problema. This will result to, of course, this will, going back sa katong ato ang gihimo, I was printing X there. Supposedly, I was printing Z. But this would actually result to the same error. Okay? Type error na gihapon. If we're going to replace or remove this quotation, okay, if we're going to make this run, we get to expect the output 20. Okay? So, okay, may problema. But, common nga mistake nga mahimo sa uban when they are printing out the values of the variables is mabutangan nila og quotation. In which, ang mahitabuan ni is, this is already printing the string Z. So, if inyuhan ng i-print, o inyo ng i-run, ang magpakita na is Z. Since what you're doing here is you are printing the string literal or a string constant nga Z. Okay? So, kana. Common na nga mistake. An example is ingani. Okay? The value of x plus y is Z. Okay? So, let's say, if you're going to make this, okay, if you're going to make this output more meaningful, what we can do is ingani, okay? So, the value of let's say ingani na lang sa, okay? Gusto lang nato nga ipakita nga later on we'll discuss typecasting, okay? Kinahanglan din typecasting nga solution, but let's say you want nga the value of x and y is, gusto na to ipakita nga z as a variable name. Okay? So, ingani na siya. Diba? Gusto na to ingana. Okay? You might be tempted to do this. But, what will happen is, unsa man. Diba? Gusto na to nga ingani, oh. What I wanted to happen is ingani. The value of, ang output na kibali is, the value of 10 plus 10 is, let's say, 20, diba? But doing this, even at this point, even though it's correct, okay, diba? If we make this run, okay, kulang tag quote. Kana, diba? This makes sense as of now, but if we're going to change this into 15, kana, then we'll make this 20. So, dili na dahil ni meaningful. Sayop na dahil ni siya. Okay, kaya dili naman 10 ang x, delete naman 10 ang y. So, how should we solve this? Okay? So, we need to cast or we need to convert. Okay? We could temporarily convert your values. Okay? So, continuing here, type conversion. So, when you put an integer and a floating point in an expression,
the integer is implicitly converted to a float. Okay? So, but pasabot ani is if you are trying to perform a calculation which has a float and an integer, the result would be in a form of a float, meaning na siya decimal part. Okay? Even though nga ang usa is integer. Okay? So you can control this with the built-in function int and float. So an example is yung ani. Okay? So kana. Okay, let's just revert back to our basic application ani. Ingana. 'Di ba? Ang result ani is of course 15 plus 20 is 35. But if himuon nato ni o let's say 15.5, the result would be, 'di ba? Take note. The result here is in a form of integer. If we're going to make this run, ang result ani of course would become a float. Nga naman kay if we add that mathematically naagi 0.5 nga madugang ana. Okay? So kana. That might be more obvious to you. But another thing here is, let's say if you do something like this. Okay? Let's say 15.0. 15 and 15.0 value-wise are of the same value. But they are of different type. Okay? So, if we're going to perform this, ang mahitabo ani is, as you get to see, 15, di ba 15 plus 20 is 35, but you are now adding 0.0 there, so this would be, as stated here, okay, when you're putting an integer and floating point in an expression, the integer is implicitly converted to a float. But ana, automatic nga i-convert sa Python ang result or ang PCAS nga integer as a float. What will happen here is ngani. Okay? Nagbutang ta og 0.0 diha. Pag-perform ani nga computation, ang gihimo sa Python is yang gihimo nga 20.0 pod ang y. Okay? So that, remember, in Python, okay, it could only perform computation of the same type. Now, Python makes it easier for us since it's a common scene nga we add float to integer. It's a very common mathematical nga scenario. So, automatically Python do that for us. Okay? But what really happened there is na ay type conversion. Gi-convert siya. In this case, automatic. What ay gihimo nga additional nga explicit nga conversion. When you say implicit, okay, it is done behind the scene. Okay? Explicit is you manually do in this case, conversion. We'll get to see later explicit conversion. Okay? So if you're going to check, di ba? This would result to 35.0. If you're going to check, we're going to, let's say, print type of x, print type y. Okay? Diba? Float, okay? 15 here, of course, is now treated as a float. Okay? Meaning na siya decimal value given this 0.0. Even though walay number diha gyud nga after sa decimal point, but writing this in that format, in this 0.0 format, already treated as a float. Okay? So, y here is 20. Well, let's try pasting this ana. Okay, still the same. You might be wondering, sir, ingon ka sir, kay iyahan nang gi-convert ang PCAS integer into float. Yes, it did convert that. But what happened here is it only performed that conversion in this step. Okay, in this instance nga iyahan nang gi-add. So we could not do something like katotong gihimo nga type. Since iyang himo na is it will temporarily convert. Okay? So that walay error nga mahitabo. Okay? Now, if you want to force, okay, let's say inyo yung i-force nga ang x ug y kay integer ug float. Okay, let's try ha. if this will cause an error, but I think this will not cause an error. You could write int, then let's have this ngani. So initially parehas sila. Parehas, there's no error. Okay, there's no error here. This will result to no error. Diba? If you're going to use this, what happened here is we are converting y to a float in this manner. Okay? Let's try if mag-error ba siya. Okay, so walay error nga nahitabo. Okay? So, I was expecting an error, but knowing that mao gani Python, since in mathematics, it's a very common mathematical scene, or a scene in mathematics nga naay decimal point to be added to an integer, which is very much possible, so kana. But if you want, let's say, if you want to try this int and float, what we can do is, let's say, if we want to use, let's say, a is equal to float 15, okay, and we want to display a, diba? Ato anang i-convert. Oops. We're going to make this run. So you get to see, i-convert niya, okay? Even though wala ta nagbutang 0.0 diha, another way of doing so is writing this function. Okay? So let's say if you want nga 20.15, that is definitely a float value. So let's say a is equal to float y. What do you think will happen? I'm always saving. So what will happen is, it's already float. I want it to be int. Okay, mo na yung gusto mahitabo. I want to convert 20.15 into an integer. Okay, is this possible? Okay, let's see. It is possible. But what happened is, iyaharang gikuha ang integer part ana nga number. It didn't perform rounding. Okay? Ang nahitabo na is gitruncate. Iyahang giputol. Iyahang giputol ang decimal part, iyahang gi-discard, ang iyahang gikuha is ang atong whole number, which is 20. So to prove nga wala niya na gi-round off, let's say we put 99 there. Okay? If it performed rounding off, okay, or rounding up, in this case, 21 ang mapakita, di ba? But in this case, okay, if we're going to make that run, so you get to see 20 ra gihapon. Kaya ang iyang gihimo is, murag iyang gi-truncate, iyang giputol, iyang gi-delete, since it convert that value to integer, so iyang gikuha ang integer part. Okay? Muna siya. So integer division produces a floating point result. Okay, which makes sense nga naman, since in a division, okay, it's not always the case nga whole number. Okay, 10 divided by 2, posible nga, it is definitely whole number, di ba? Walay bungkig, buot pasabot, walay remainder. But to be safe, okay, Python would display that in a floating point format para to cater the possibility nga naagyoy mga quotient, nag-result sa division nga naibungkig. So in this case, 9 divided by 2, so 9.5. That's why it would automatically convert the result to floating point. Okay? So string conversion. So you can also use int and float to convert between strings and integers. You will get an error if the string doesn't contain numeric characters. So, unsay bot pasabot ani. Let's go into an example na diretso. Diba? Okay. So, let's say we have x is equal to 15.5. 15.5. Ano yung himuog ko an? 15.5. Kana. Diba? If you want to, let's say, z is equal to int. Okay? X. Diba? Ito rin mo kanina. Print z. So, yung himoon is 15, as expected. But what if ato aning himuon. Okay. Will this cause an error? Remember, this is a string value, but we perform this numeric na function to this string value. We're going to make this run. Okay, this will cause an error. It's invalid. Kana. Ang naitabo ani is, okay, it could not retrieve a valid integer. Okay? Even though kanina makaingon ta nga, sir, dapat yahan ang nakuha ang 15. No. Since ang inyong gi-feed nga data is string, what will happen is you can use int or float to convert to convert between strings and integers. Okay? Meaning straightforward dapat. So since ani you are trying to convert an integer sa string nga 15.5, which is not, the Python could not readily see an integer number here, so mag-cause siya error. But if you're going to remove the 0.5 there, okay, if you're going to make this run, magpakita na siya 15. Okay, so murag na siya, di ba, mura siya na ay additional, murag na siya dili siya parihas atong gihimo nato nga katong sa float ug sa int, kay we are actually dealing with strings here. And if you're dealing with strings, and if you want to retrieve a number ana nga string, dapat pagbasa pa lang nato daan, okay, when you're going to convert that, let's say, to an int, nagi integer, and integer gyud nga value ang iyahang makita. Okay, what I meant by this is ingani. Okay, let's say we write let's say 15. What if lang 21? Okay, if you're going to print that, okay, it will give you 21. And if you want to know the type of that, okay, the type of z, print type z, that is actually already integer. Okay, kaya convert naman siya. This is type conversion from one type to another. Okay, but if you're going to write, let's say 21, okay, would this convert to a 21 integer? Definitely not. Kaya wala man siya makita nga 21. Okay, Python could not read that as a number. It could read that as a word, or not read, but could process that as a word nga 21. Now let's say, sir, how about ingani? Okay, 20 dayon 1, 21. Let's see. Okay, nagya po yung error nga naman. Wala siya, do nakita niya ang 20, but it treated it as a value nga naapoy 1 diri nga string. So wala may integer ana gyud nga as a whole, okay, nga na integer equivalent nga ingani. Okay? So unless inyohan nang specify ra gyud diha nga 20, okay, then it could do that. Okay? You might be wondering, sir, asa na magamit? Okay? Why is this discussed? Okay? We'll see later ang importance ani. Okay? Actually, this could be the solution ato kung previous nga problem. Yang kato bitang sa to xy 15 plus 20. Then gusto nato makita ang z is equal to sa tawag gani x plus y. Sige, going back, is result to 35. Gusto nato nga meaningful. Unsa man 35, okay? We want to have it to be displayed in a meaningful manner. Let's say the sum of x and y, okay, x and y is z. Okay? Now, if you're going to do this, ang makita nato is ingani, okay? It's not meaningful enough, okay? So, what's this? Okay, natay gihimo diri nga computation, but we could not print that out here. Siguro pwede na to himo ni ngani, okay? Di ba? If we want to print an integer or a variable, the content of a variable, we should not enclose that in quotation. We need to present that as the actual variable. Okay? So ato ning anam-anamon ha. Let's say gusto nato nga makita ang result lang, okay? Let's do this piece by piece. What you can do is ingani. The sum of x and y is z. Okay, pwede ba ka ni? Okay, let's try. Okay, di ba? Pwede man ingani. Okay, let's cut this. Of course, pwede na siya. Magpakita na siya og 35. But gusto na to dungagan nga ingani. And we cannot do it like this. Okay? Kay 14 lagi magpakita siya. So what we can do is ingani plus z. Let's try if mugana ni siya. Okay? Oh, na error na type. This is a type error. Okay? You can only concatenate string and not int. Okay? The reason is this is a string. You are trying to concatenate it with z, which is actually an integer. Diba? Ang iyang gina-deal ani is the integer 15 and 20. So if you're going to, if you want to convert that, what you can do is ingani. I haven't really discussed this, but this is very similar in. Yeah, let's check. Is this okay? Wala. But this is just like a preview for our next discussion. Okay. What you can do is, diba, vice versa. Okay, we could somehow convert this into, diba? Ato ang na-discuss is we get to convert this into an integer. We could actually also convert an integer to a string, and we want to do that here. Tungod ani nga error. Okay, nga you cannot concatenate integer and string. So what you can do is write str. Ingana. This is actually discussed next. So you might be confused, but anyway, ato naman na yung na-tackle. So doing this will hopefully solve the error. So if you're going to make this run, okay, so we have a string here, a string constant here, plus an operand here, or a variable here, which we convert from int to string by writing str. So we're going to make this run. Okay, sakto na, wala error. And it retrieved the 35. Okay, so the sum of x and y is 35. And to make this more meaningful, okay, we would like also to return the value of this. Nga naman, okay, gusto na makita nga, how do we know that it's really the sum of the sum of 35 is x and y? How do we know the value of x and y? Okay, what we can do is ingani, ato ang ipagawas. Okay, ato ang ipagawas sa quotation ang ato ang x and y, di ba? Kay para dili siya ma-print as a literal or as a constant. And since we want to concatenate this, kay this na to subayin kay ingani this will cause an error. We also need to add plus here para ma-concatenate siya into a one whole word. And remember, okay, we want to have a space parehas ani, and doing this mura ni og sum of then x, kung say value sa x mudikit na siya. So we could add spaces here para mas mabasa siya. And finally, okay, we want to use the str function. Okay, if delay, if I'm going to make this run, nanapoy error. Okay, similar error, or the same reason why we got an error is wala nato siya nabutang og str. So str. The beauty of this is not only that we could make the output meaningful to the user, let's say using this program. Okay, whenever we're going to update the values here, let's say 100 plus 200, okay, automatically magpakita pud na dira sa tuang output. That is the beauty of variables. Okay, you get also to print that in this manner, aning print statement. So there is actually a much easier way of doing this, but sunod na to na i-discuss. Karon, I hope you get to understand nga na ay conversion ka kay tabo, and it's very possible to convert. Before you get to perform operation with different variables or with different data, okay, Python requires you to have it in the same type. There are instances in which Python implicitly do that for you, meaning behind the scene yan ang himuon. That is applicable when you are performing addition, multiplication, okay, subtraction, anang integer and floating point. So iyan na lang dungagan og himuon niya to og floating point temporarily ang integer. Or if you are going to perform integer division between two numbers, let's say 5 and 2, the result would be implicitly converted to a float. So nga na. But in this case, you need to do things explicitly, meaning you are going to really force the conversion in a form of this str function, float function, and unsa pa int na function. Okay? So kana. So we proceed with user input. Okay? This is the most this what makes your program dynamic and interactive. Okay? We can instruct Python to pause and read data from the user using the input function. Okay? So the input function returns a string. This is a very important thing that you need to remember. Okay? So in this example, nasa num nga variable, input is who are you. Now, how you're going to write the input function is ngani. Okay? You assign the value, we ultimately have a string here. That's why most of the time we want to store that in a variable. Okay? So let's say you have a variable NAM here, or num. We write the word input, then inside the parenthesis is the actual prompt or the question or the statement that Python will write before accepting your user input. Okay, so mao na siya. So going into code, so let's say we want to change this. Okay, we want to retain, this functionality nga mag-add tag number, but instead of manually writing 100 and 200 as the value of our two numbers, what we want is ngani. Okay, let's say we use the same variable x in this case. X is equal to input, let's say enter the value, the x value. Okay, so most of the time you want to have this magingani bitaw nga if you want to ask a certain value, it helps nga naatay mo ra colon then space para mo ra bitaw og we get to see later sa itsura na. Okay, mura na siya og gahuwat na siya og user input sa ato ang program. Okay, then y is equal to input enter the y value. Okay, now what happened here is instead of having a fixed or a constant value sa tong x and y in performing the addition, we now have a value that would require you to have a user input. So let's try this. Okay, ang lahi lang is kani. Okay, let's try. Okay, enter x value, let's say 15. Enter y value, let's say 20. So we expect that it will perform the addition dire z is equals to x plus y, so 15 plus 20 is 35. Then iha din i-print nga ngani kato bitatong gihimo kanina nga unsay value sa x, unsay sa value sa y ang ipakita dire, unsay value sa sum iha ipakita dire. Okay, so let's check. Okay, now it returned something, di ba? Definitely it didn't cause an error. An error that what I meant here is wala siya nagresulta og compile error. Okay, kaya wala siya nabutag kanang type error nga na, but unsay nahitabo? What did you observe? Sakto nga nakuha niya ang 15 og 20, nabutang niya dire, but ang iyahang gihimo, what did you observe? Kanan gikuha ang 15 ug 20. if you get to see, ihara ng gisumpay. Okay? Instead of performing 15 plus 20 which is 35, iyang gisumpay ang atong gi-enter diri. Okay? 15 ug 20 iyang gisumpay. So, iyang gi-concatenate. You might be wondering, hala sir, ngano yung i-concatenate nga number man na, then ato man ang gi-add. Okay? Mag-error unta siya. Remember, okay, as what I have said, or as what I've mentioned earlier, the input function returns a string. Buot pasabot ana, kung ang type ani, if you get to, okay, if you get to write type, print, ito na lang butang dali, print, type. Again, this is the reason why it's very helpful to use type if you want to determine the type of that variable. Okay? Especially here na dili pa evident. You might be wondering, ngano string? Nga naman, kaya if you're going to, ito na lang yung ibutang dere. So after magbutang taog x and y value, i-print niya ang type sa x and y. So kani. So let's say so to 15, 20, so you get to see, di ba? String. And since string ni duha, then it performs, di ba? An operation in Python requires all of its operands to be the same type. So string man tanan ang x and y. So what will happen is yan ang i-concatenate, yan ang idikit. Yan gidikit ang 15 ug 20 nahimo siya 15 20 nga string diri. Okay? So how do you solve that? Okay? Atuan atong gihimo kanina. Okay? We could solve that by doing something like this. Okay? There are many ways of doing this or solving this, but one way is ingani. You could convert, okay? You could write str, not str, but int. You want to convert x and y into int. You can do that here, or if your program is always referring to x and y directly, then it always perform mathematical or integer operation, so pwede po dire. Okay? So what happened here is iyahangi, you explicitly convert the type from string to integer. So if we're going to make this run, okay, 15, enter ang magkuha na, pag human mo og type, you press enter, 20, so now, you arrive with the correct answer. Okay? So if we perform, let's say, if ato ang balihon, or not balihon, but if ato ang ibutang ang int nga conversion, dere, int, rest ra gihapon. Okay, let's use another number. 100, enter 200. Okay, so parehas ra gihapon. So it just depends on the scenario in your program nga, if perminti i-refer dere nga number or integer siya, then diretso na nato, pwede na ito nga diha i-typecast or i-convert. Okay? So that is how input function is used. And as you get to see, your program is now more meaningful, okay, more useful. So let's simulate this example before we proceed. So let's say name, okay, input, let's say, what's your name? What is your name? Okay, space. Well, let's try not adding space there. Then we get to print, let's say, print welcome back. Then remember, if you want to concatenate the value, di ba dili na to na pwede himon nga ani. What will happen is, okay, let's say, so you get to see mo proceed sa next line. Okay, I think this behaves differently in different compiler, but so be it. As you get to see, name, okay? Meaning, diba? Remember, if you want to display the actual value of that variable, we need to exclude that in our quotation. Kaya kung i-quotes na to na, kung unsa ang gisulat diha, mo na i-print. So, what we can do is, we could write plus name. And no need for you to perform conversion here, kay remember, what is being returned here is, or what is being stored, okay, when you're going to use the input function is of type string. So this is string, so this, we expect this to run smoothly. So let's say, kana. So welcome back sa kana. Okay, so it's a very basic application. So converting user input, ato na itong gihimo kanina. Comments in Python. Okay, so mao ni ako ang I demonstrated it earlier. Anything after a pound sign is ignored by Python. So why is there a need to comment? Comment is used sa ako ang ipakita kanina to describe what is going to happen in a sequence of code. It is also useful to document who wrote the code or other ancillary information, or if you want to turn off a code perhaps temporarily. Okay, so let's try. Okay, let's not discuss this. So summary na. So before we end this, there's actually another exercise that we would like to perform. Okay, so kani, let's focus on comments. So kani, let's say balik na to ang ato ang x is equal to ito, input, enter x value, y input, enter y value. Okay, so sa to, z is equal to x plus y. Oops, y. Then print the sum of x and I hope ma-imagine nyo, mamata-mata ninyo ni. Through experience, pwede ninyo diretso-diretso on, and there's actually a much better way to do this, but since mauni ako ang na-demonstrate karon, okay, so kanilang sa tong gamiton. The value of x and y is z. Okay, di ba nani error? Okay, so we're going to make this run. So 10 plus 20. Okay, so na siya problema. So using comment, okay, one way of using comment is of course ingani. Okay, di ba sa pound sign? There's actually two ways. I think there's at least two ways of writing comment. One is the pound sign, which is line by line yung comment. Okay, we could write programmer. Programmer is Romer, Ayan, o Pasok. So ako kibali programmer ani. Okay, so that is one. This would not, any line here, okay, this would not be treated as a line of code in Python or by Python. Okay, so you could do it like this. You could use comments like that. Okay, ang multi-line na comment, I think it uses through quotation nga ni. Okay, program to add two numbers from user input. So this could be a comment, but siguro dili lang sana ko na-introduce sa inyo ha. Para dili mo malibog kung sa lecture notes. But we'll try that later in our future videos. Especially if gipakita pod na nga demonstration. But for now, kani. You could use that to inform or to document, meaning to let the person know that kana nga program, let's say the programmer is kana, or if you want to retain katong ganina, this program will add two numbers from two user inputs. So, kana. Di na siya. Pwede po di-explain dari nga first number input, then second number. So this is just somewhat like an exaggeration, kaya ito ang gina-comment line per line nga if kasabot na ta, so we really need not do that. But in cases nga inyong program is very complex, then doing this is very convenient. Okay? And it is even a form of requirement sa uban company nga i-comment. But kani, it's very convenient kay let's say katong giingon kanina bitaw nga if naamoy trabaho, naamoy gi-code dayon pila ka semana ninyo nga wala na trabaho, then if you're going to go back programming that, dako ang tendency nga namoy malimtan or malibog mo. And if you have commented that beforehand, then you get to have an idea kung unsa na siya. Okay? So that is why commenting is very important. So this is one way of using comments. So if you're going to make this run, this would achieve exactly the same result, which is kana. So you get to see it's still an error. Okay? So one way of correcting comment or of using comment to temporarily disable code is nga ni. Okay? So let's say nga murag naisayop sa kuang code. So di ba? Ang common nato siguro atong himuon is unsa type aning x and y. So print, so this is troubleshooting, okay? Type x and print type y. Okay? So if doing so, we get to know nga, let's say 10, 15. Okay, ang type diya, we do not want this to be displayed in the final output of your program, but as for troubleshooting, we could do this. Okay? Natay gina-print. Then type string ng iyang type. So this is a problem kay we want to add two numbers and we need to have a mathematical value for that. So once realizing nga ani, what we can do is instead of removing this, if you intend to use this later to troubleshoot again, what you can do is atawasan na i-comment. Okay? Then let's change this. Okay? Let's change this to str. Not str but int. Then let us change this to int. Okay? So if ato na ipadagan 10 plus 15. Okay, so na po yung error. Sa may error na to ani. Okay? Dire na pod. Okay, remember, since this has become an integer nga number, then we need to convert this into string na pod. Okay? Diba? You only can concatenate string values if all of these operand are of string data type. So kaning x, y, and z when doing this, okay, will convert x and y to integer, and Python would automatically assign whatever value of whatever type of that value is, yan ang i-retain, yan ang i-inherit na type. So nahimo na po siya int ang z. So we want to have it into string. Na. Okay? So we're going to make this run 10, 15. So sige to see, wala na ni nagpakita kay ato amang gi-comment. And of course kani wala ni impact sa ato ang code kay comments man na sila. All of the text that is written with a pound would be treated as a comment and it will not be included in the compilation. Okay? So if mag-troubleshoot na pod mo, mas dali nga ato lang nang iyan comment, okay, to check if, let's say in this case 12, 15. Okay, int na gyud. Okay? So kana. So if you fail to, let's say, nagbutang mo diri murag nakalimot mo nga na, let's say ito na i-comment. So since wala na siya pound sign, and let's say you originally want to use that as a comment, if ito na ipadagan, then this will be treated as a statement, and Python will check. Okay, it will include that in its compilation. Then makita niya nga unsa man I do not know this, I do not know how to compile this, that's why it would return an invalid syntax or a syntax error. Okay, so you should know when to use comment. So there are 3 common application if you want to describe your code, if you want to explain that part of your code, if you want to document if you want to document your code in a form of kinsay naghimo and unsay ginahimo ana, if you want to explain part of your code, then if you want to temporarily disable part of your code. Okay, nga na ang gamit sa comment. So there is an exercise here. Okay, so let's try and solve this. Okay, write a program to prompt the user. Okay, kung giingon gani nga to prompt the user, it is expected that you should use input function. Okay, so ga-receive sa user input and rate per hour to compute the gross pay. So kaning 35 ug 275, these are all user input. So saan man tani pag solve. Okay, so let's try VS Code. We have been using online Python, so let's try VS Code para po sa katong gagamit og VS Code. So unsa tong problem? The problem was to create write a program to prompt the user for hours. So ang iyang output is ngani na enter hours, then enter rate, then ang pay. So it's very easy. Okay, so first is we need to find a way to store the number of hours. Now depende, remember to ako ang giingon when naming variables. So in this case, since na meaning nga to ang mga data, we could use that as a form of mnemonic. Okay, so what we can do is we could write hours as a variable, then input ato lang ning padakon. Okay, input enter hours. Okay, mao man ang gibutan niya, enter hours, then rate. So input enter rate. So unsa may computation ana? Okay, we normally compute that. Okay, I think napakita ni earlier. Anara. Okay, so di ba mao? Okay, so happens nga mao ang gigamit. Pay is equal to hours times rate. Okay, then unsa to nga ipakita? So pay print, diba? You still need to display this para again to make your program meaningful. So you can make this program more meaningful than it is. Okay, kamay bahala. It's important that kana inyong program dili lang na magpakita og output nga out of the blue nga wa kabalo unsa gibasihan ana. Okay, it doesn't mean nga imo nyong ibutang i-print pagid ninyo ang formula. Okay, ang importante is remember how you use your computer conveniently. So you need to remember that as a programmer, you need to capture that environment. Okay, so pay is equal to saman pay. Yeah, let's definitely na error ani. Okay, what do you think is the error? First is, okay, you did not convert the appropriate data type. Now since, take note, okay, hours here is integer kay 35 kuan man. So ang ato ang rate is 2.75. So let's assume nga ang pag-compute sa yang rate is by hours gyud. Okay? So let's say integer gyud. So you can use integer. But let's say pwede bungkig. Let's say 35.6 nga hours. So if naa gani bungkig ana, okay? You could convert that into, let's say, float. Or in this case, dali na lang. Definitely sa rate, bungkig na siya. So, float. So, let's retain. What will happen if we retain, we use integer sa tuang hours, but when we are entering information is we use float. Tsaka error na. Okay? So what will happen here, there's no problem here na dayon, kaya remember, even though hours and rate here are different data type, implicitly, since this is a common scenario in math and computation, when you Python will implicitly convert these hours into a float. Kaya ang rate man is a float na data. Okay? So, dali na yun, print pay as pay. Remember, this is now float nga data type. Okay? And since if you want to concatenate strings, okay? If you want to concatenate strings, all of it should be string of string data type. So, dili na ito na basta-basta may mga ana. So, ito na lang diretso on og correct. So, let's write float here. Okay? So, let's try and make this run. So, kanay padak on. So, enter hours, let's say 35. So, tapos ang awaton. So, pay is there something? Can only concatenate string. Oh no, why did we convert? So, na error. Okay, this is like imo pag yung gihimog sayop, ang sayop pag yun. Okay, of course we would not use float there. I was contradicting, di ba? Ingon ko tanan nga dapat if you're concatenating strings, dapat string tanan ang operands. So we need to convert that into string, of course. So, di ba? It's very common. Even I make mistakes in this very much basic nga mga problems. Okay? It just shows nga dapat praktisado gyud. And if makita ko mong error, di mo mataranta, you could through experience, in my case, I readily notice nga sayop gyud. Kaya I know na dapat string tanan ang part sa concatenation. So, I immediately through experience, okay, I immediately know nga dapat str nga function ang gamiton. But I'm not saying correct na niya. Let's see. Okay, while compiling. Okay, so 35, enter, 2.75, okay, sakto na, 96.25. If gusto gyud ninyo nga na space diha in between, so you could simply write print there. Yeah, let's make this run again. So this will force another line of blank nga line sa tuang output. So sa to 35, to asan yung padakan, 35, 2.75. Sige to see na line diya. So 96.25. What if magbutang ta diri sa enter hours na to. By the way, if you're in PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, okay, or even in command line, you could simply, if you want nga gusto na ko mo gawas ani nga program, okay, you could press Control C, then your program will be forcefully terminated. Okay, so what if I'm going to it's a very common nga murag siguro di mo ganahan daghan kay mo makita. You could simply write CLS, okay, then ma-erase na. It doesn't really erase, but your console will adjust in a way nga mawala tong mga previous na text. Okay, so going back, katanay padagan, let's say butang kog 35.5. Yan atong rate. Okay. So, ngano na yung error. Okay? Since you are trying to enter, okay, you're trying to enter a value which is not of int. Okay, it could not convert, which it's not, it's different. Okay, it's not of integer value. So dire, what happened here is na siya error. You might be wondering, sir, di ba if ang float sa to, di ba if ang sa to, let's open kani. Di ba yung ka-sir nga kung int float, let's say int float, let's say 35.5, magresulta na siya to kuan, mahimo na siya og 35. That's correct, di ba? But why did it cause an error? Remember, I've also demonstrated earlier nga, di ba? Ang ato ang input nga function, it would actually return a string. So if you're writing 35.5 there, mahitabo is ingani. Okay? 35.5 is actually a string. And if you are going to forcefully convert that into an integer value, di ba nag-error to kanina? Okay? Kay lahi ang treatment ani. Again, wala siya makita nga int ani nga string nga value, that is why nag-cause siya og error. So mao na ang explanation ana. Okay? But if you're going to change this to float, okay? So 35.5, wala na error since what it did there is nag-float ta dira, and it so happens nga naa siya nakita diha nga float yun. Okay? So wala siya error. If we're going to nato na ma-erase, so kana, I believe that is correct. Let's compute that. So 35.5 times 2.75, okay, sakto. But sir, what if kani float na siya? If we're going to make this run, will this cause an error? Magbutang ta og 35. Okay? Wala siya nag-error. Let's see if we're going to continue doing this. 96.25 gihapon. 96.25 gihapon. Ngano wala nag-error? Okay? Now, the thing here is, even though nagbutang ta og 35 lang diha, okay, what happened here is, this is quite technical, but ang nahitabo diri is it treated 35 here as ingana. Okay, so murag technicality lang ni in between sa int ug float, in which float, diba, a float is, diba, a float could be, it could be ingani, pwede ingana, pwede ingana. Okay, it could be, meaning, what I'm trying to say here is, value wise, okay, 35 and 35.0 walay nawala na nga value. Okay, meaning float as a data type is capable of storing, of course it could store decimal value, but if integer value lang gatag sa iya, walay problema. Okay, there's no problem with that. The problem is, okay, let's say we have again value wise, even though this is the same value 35 if you're going to quantify this, but as a type 35 is not 35, the number 35 is not the same with 35.0 when it comes to type. Okay, so there is no problem with having it like this, nga ang float is gihatagan nato og 35 nga integer value, kay wala may nawala na, kay ang, di ba, unsay part sa float nga number, na siya whole number, na siya decimal part. But the problem here is if you're going to, let's say, integer, Okay? Then ingana. Okay? Now, what happened here is naay value, naay data nga mawala. Ang mawala ani is kaning 0.5. Okay? So, there are cases in which the value, what will happen is iharang i-truncate, meaning iharang kwaon ang whole number nga part. But what happened here is dili pareha sa float nga na-retain ang integrity sa data. Here na ay nawala. So that is one technicality. That's why this is quite technical. Ngano dili straightforward ang pag-convert aning float aning 11.0 or 5 kaysa nga ni. Ngano pwede ni, then dili ni pwede. Kay if mo ni, okay, mawala ang value ana. Okay? But if doing this, okay, walay mawala nga value. Okay? But anyway, hopefully you get to see, okay, see the wonders of programming in this level. Okay? Basic pa ni. Okay? We discussed with to, as a summary. So as a summary, so we discussed type, we discussed reserved words, variables, operator precedence, integer division, okay, conversion between types, user input, and comments. Okay, so this is already quite a long video. Okay, but I hope this explains comprehensively the topic that has been shown here. Okay, what you can do is pwede ninyo dili ni tan-awon nga usa ka tan-awan. Okay, inyo lang piece by piece. Anyway, naman tayo ma-observe man ninyo na sa flow sa atong lecture. So the thing here is importante is na hopefully na-explain nato. Kaya na-explain nako and napakitaan ta mo og examples in which it would clear out any confusion. Okay? So na siguro uban nga na-introduce nako nga topic nga might be confusing to you. So I hope it didn't really confuse you in a way nga murag samot mo nagka-loading or unsa, but expect lang yun nga na ma-encounter magud nato na pohon. Okay, I am just relating what will happen, okay, in the future for our course. Katakong gipang ingon kanina. So di na ako na ingon karon. So kana lang. Okay, so that ends my lecture video. Hopefully topics were discussed well, examples has been shown clearly, and if you have questions, kindly write that in the comment section sa tuwang class work, okay, or sa comment section sa YouTube in which I would be uploading this. Okay, so that would be all. See you in our next lecture video.